Our first company presenting today is Charger Metals NL. Charger's ASX code is CHR and it has a market cap of 17 million. Charger Metals has a portfolio of battery metals projects in WA and the Northern Territory that are considered by the board to be prospective for demand-driven metals associated with the renewable energy sector. Presenting today for the company is Managing Director Aidan Platel. Aidan, welcome and please take it away.
Yeah, thanks very much, Manny, and g'day everyone. As Manny said, I'm here to give you a very brief update on Charger Metals and in particular our key lithium assets here in Australia. We'll jump straight into it because we've got to get through a fair bit. So there's the disclaimers as usual. So I'd like to begin today, obviously, with a very brief overview of who we are at Charger Metals and what we do. Obviously, in a nutshell, we're an ASX-listed junior explorer and very much focused on systematic exploration of our two key, highly prospective lithium assets here in Australia. So in Western Australia, we have our Lake Johnson Lithium Project, where our very first drilling program, our maiden drilling program at our first key prospect at Metcalfe, successfully intersected high-grade lithium in spodumene-bearing pegmatites, which are still open long strike and at depth. We've identified several other key target areas that we're very keen to drill, and we're working on getting those permits now. And obviously our big news very recently is the farming agreement we've signed up with Rio Tinto, which I'll delve into a bit later. Our other main project, the Boino Lithium Project in the Northern Territory, directly along strike and actually surrounded completely by Core Lithium's Finniss Lithium Project, which is obviously mining operations are well underway. On our prospect, we've identified well over 25 prospect areas, and most of those are still untested by drilling. We're well funded, very tight capital structure, and we have a very experienced team. Next slide, please. So on that note, a quick snapshot of our corporate structure with $3.4 million in cash after our recent capital raise last week. And with the Rio Tinto deal, there's a further $1.7 million to come in the next 5 to 6 weeks. So very well funded, as I mentioned. Only 73 million shares on issue. So very tightly held and, very much leveraged to any exploration success we do have. Looking at our team, very highly skilled and experienced board and senior management. Adrian Griffin, David Crook, some of the first movers into the lithium exploration space here in Australia. So all of us have had exploration success and all of us have developed battery minerals projects. So it's a great team really to take this forward. Next slide. So what's the value proposition that we offer? Obviously, our two key lithium projects both have known lithium mineralization, both in fantastic jurisdictions, very underexplored for lithium. So in other words, really strong potential for a major lithium discovery, both in terms of grade and scale. The other key factor is our location, tier 1 Australian jurisdictions with access to mining, ports, infrastructure, known lithium mining in the areas. Australia is currently producing over half the world's lithium, so what better place to be operating in? We have systematic exploration programs across the portfolio, so we're giving ourselves every chance of that exploration success. We really believe in the huge potential of both of our projects and we're getting out there and drilling. And as mentioned, we certainly have the team and the people and the experience to make those major discoveries and drive these projects forward. Next slide. So taking a close look at our projects, obviously starting with our Lake Johnson Lithium Project, very much in the news recently. There's quite a hot area at the moment. I mentioned earlier that Australia is producing over half the world's lithium. There certainly seems to be a lot of lithium companies exploring for it these days on the ASX. But the fact is that there still is only 14 JORC compliant lithium resources in Australia. And you can see there on that map of the Yilgarn, there's 10 of those resources right there. And our Lake Johnson project's pretty much smack bang in the middle of those and closest to the largest of them in the Earl Grey project, which is only 70 k's away. So fantastic location for prospectivity, but also for the road, the rail, the port, and the general infrastructure we have of our mining-centric region. Next slide. So as I said, our big news for Lake Johnson Lithium Project that we announced a couple of weeks ago is our farming agreement with Rio Tinto. Obviously a great deal for Charger and its shareholders, and I think a real validation of the prospectivity of our tenure and the potential to host a large-scale lithium deposit. If we can just look quickly at the main highlights of the deal. So RTX, Rio Tinto Exploration, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Rio Tinto, will take a $1.2 million placement and pay $500 in cash before we even start the farming. And that's the 1.7 I mentioned earlier that's still to come in the kitty shortly. Then they put $3 million into exploration expenditure in the first 12 months. So that doesn't get them any position. That's really just a pay to play, if you like, and see if they like it. From there, they can go on and spend a total of $10 million in exploration costs to earn up to 51% of the project. And then moving on from that, and a further $30 million to earn up to 75% of the project. So all up around $43 million to get to 75% of the project. Now, there's cash payments along the way, along milestone payments and significant intersection payments and the like. And if they get to the 51% and decide they don't want to go to the 75%, then that automatically converts back to Charger having 51 and Rio having 49. So we will be the major operator, the major partner, and we can move it forward at that stage as well ourselves. So obviously, to deal with Rio Tinto, we first wanted to have 100% of the Lake Johnson project ourselves. It's currently a 70-30 JV with Lithium Australia. So simultaneous to the Rio agreement, we've signed an agreement with Lithium Australia to buy out their minority holding. So that's being a major shareholder of us, Lithium Australia. We need that shareholder approval. So that's scheduled. There should be a NOM going out very shortly, and we'll have an EGM for that in early January. Next slide. So looking at the high-grade lithium potential of this project, the Lake Johnson project, the work done to date has identified several key target areas. As I said, obviously the Metcalfe prospect is the first one, where we've already confirmed very high-grade lithium in a swarm of spodumene-bearing pegmatites. We have our Mount Day prospect, a very large LCT pegmatite field. It's a very strong soil anomaly and lithium-bearing pegmatite outcrops. More recently, we've added the Mount Gordon prospect, a very large soil anomaly over 3 kilometres long, which is adjacent to PG Metals Burmeister discovery, which you might have read about. And this week, actually, we announced a new spodumene trend where we've got high-grade spodumene in pegmatite outcrops, which is just west of Metcalfe. Next slide. So let's look at our Metcalfe prospect first. Obviously, our most advanced prospect to date. Very strong soil anomaly that extends for over 1,400 metres. Now, these numbers in soils are pretty high. You can see there, in the thousands of ppm lithium oxide. Having seen the soil anomaly, we saw the pegmatite outcrops on the ground, visual spodumene, rock chip samples between 1.5% and 7% lithium, so very high grade. Earlier this year, we put 41 holes into it, which were pretty much the first holes for lithium in this whole Lake Johnson greenstone belt, save for a handful of holes that Poseidon have done earlier. So really first mover holes, and a very successful program. Found what we'd seen an outcrop in that swarm of pegmatites. It's defined over 700 metres of strike, a swarm of stacked spodumene-bearing pegmatites, open to the northwest along strike, along that soil anomaly, and still very much open at depth. So with preparations underway for drilling those extensions. We already have a POW in place to diamond drill extensional, and we're going to do some met drilling as well to do some met testing. So we're looking very eagerly to commencing that program shortly. Next slide. So Mount Day prospect, as I said, a very strong lithium soil. Again, there's very high numbers in soils there. 5.5 by 1.5 kilometres anomaly. It's a very large soil anomaly. We've got outcropping pegmatite with, again, very high rock chip numbers as well. Working on the environmental and Aboriginal heritage surveys at the moment, so we can get drilling into that as well. And as I said, we announced this week our new spodumene pegmatite trend immediately to the west of our Metcalfe drilling. So a new outcrop that our geos have discovered whilst mapping, and we got some very high grade samples off that, very visual spodumene again. And that lines up with this new trend that's sort of northeast, southwest. It's over 1.2 kilometres of outcrops of visual spodumene pegmatite outcrops with high grade. So pretty excited about that, and certainly keen to get drilling that and see what develops at depth there. The very northeastern one of those three groups of outcrops is within our POW, so we can certainly drill that very soon. Next slide. And finally, our Mount Gordon prospect, we did soils through the winter there, a full coverage of soil sampling. And we've got some very significant lithium in soil anomalies there, over 3 kilometres long. You can see there that the adjacent tenement is the TG Metals tenement, where they've successfully intersected spodumene veins under their soil anomaly. And that soil anomaly is only 100 ppm, so it's quite low values compared to our other soil anomalies, but yet it produced spodumene veins. So it's a pretty exciting discovery. We've certainly opened our ground up a lot. Now we're reviewing our soils over all of our ground again and looking at these sort of lower level anomalies, and certainly we have a lot to get through and a lot to drill as well. Next slide. So having a quick look at our other main focus, which is our Boino project in the Northern Territory. Fantastic location, only about an hour's drive from Darwin, and covers 63 square kilometres in a known spodumene-enriched province. Critical importance, obviously, is that we're surrounded by Core Lithium's project. You can finish project, you can see that in the pink. Even those 2 little rectangles in the grey there within our tenure, Core Lithium as well. So we're effectively a donut right in that main structural corridor there. You can see in the yellow, it's defined by gravity and mag as the key prospective corridor up there in the Finnish region. So if you're not familiar with Core, have a look, but they have resources over 31 million tonnes at 1.3%, commenced mining and shipping of spodumene concentrate. So it's a pretty prospective area, and we're right in the middle of it. Next slide. So at our Boino project, we've established well over 25 key lithium target areas, and we've done that from pegmatite outcrops or soil anomalies or historical tin tantalum workings, which are actually one of the best indicators of potential lithium mineralisation. So plenty of targets to get through. We had quite a major drilling campaign in the dry season this year, and tested 7 of those prospect areas, those in the red, and 3 of those we intersected spodumene in LCT pegmatites up to 24 metres wide. So certainly a lot of smoke at this stage, and really highlights the key prospectivity of this area. So there's still more than 20 priority targets we still need to drill test. And later in the season, we actually completed coincident infill soil sampling, a ground gravity survey and an ANT survey, so 2 geophysical surveys on the ground there. You can see in those rectangles in that northeastern portion of our tenure. They're still all being modelled. We've been told the ANT will be mid-January, and that's pretty critical to define the gravity modelling as well. So we fully hope to work up even more targets than the 20 we've already got before the next dry season. So really late April, May before we can start drilling there again. And the ANT and gravity certainly in combination has the good chance to define some more prospects, particularly of pegmatites that are blind, so might not be outcropping at surface. Next slide. So that's pretty much us in a nutshell. So why should you invest in Charger Metals? First and foremost, obviously we're a lithium company. Haven't even attempted to talk about the lithium thematics and the markets, but obviously there's a huge demand for lithium. It's only increasing with the growing battery and EV markets. And I think you all know, if you're investing, that it really is the commodity to be looking at and investing in at this point in time. On that front, we have 2 really highly prospective projects in proven spodumene-rich provinces like Johnston in WA, where we've already confirmed high-grade lithium in spodumene, and where we have a significant scale potential, and obviously the Rio deal has really firmed that up. And our Boino Lithium project in the Northern Territory, where again we have many prospective targets along strike from a producing spodumene mine. We're really cranking up the exploration and giving ourselves every chance of that exploration success. And from those significant work programs, we'll obviously have a very consistent news flow to market. We're very well funded. We have a really tight capital structure, and we're very much leveraged to exploration success. Next slide. So that's Charger Metals. Thank you very much for listening.
Aidan, thank you for that. We've got a couple of questions.
Yep.
Why don't we start with this one? How important is the Rio Tinto farm in number 1? And does that farm in actually bring to bear Rio's technical ability as well? Are they going to contribute quite substantially on that side? Are they going to how how are you going to benefit from that farming, and to what extent?
Yeah, I think we benefit on both of those fronts. Obviously, we are managing the project, being the holder of the project, certainly in the first 12 months and until they're 51 or above. So we manage the project, but certainly have that access to their technical firepower, both in terms of people and resources. They'll be very much involved in our planning and our work programs, and they certainly do have some pretty good resources that we otherwise wouldn't have access to. So going to involve them as much as we can. I'm always of the opinion for exploration and geology, the more heads, the better. And they'll be very, very active in that sense. And obviously the funding, $40 million into a project, that's not money we would ever be able to put into the ground ourselves. So it's pretty significant expenditure on that project. So I think in both fronts, it's a pretty significant deal.
Okay, and is it fair to say that from a funding perspective now, it looks pretty robust? I gather the company is unlikely to sort of require much funding in the short term, right?
No, not at all. We just rattled the tin last week, so we're pretty set now. And obviously with Rio to fund the vast majority of the Lake Johnson side of things for the foreseeable future. So funded, ready to go.
Right. And in terms, just coming back again to Rio, and Rio must have seen something that attracted them, and within that context, there's a question here saying how does Lake Johnson compare to the other lithium projects in the area?
Well, I think that's the key. I think the Yilgarn, we know the greenstone belts of the Yilgarn all have significant spodumene deposits as per that map, except for the Lake Johnson greenstone belt, which is in the middle of these other greenstones. And really, I think that's the function of the lack of exploration for it. So I think Rio's identified that. Obviously, our first program at Metcalfe hit spodumene and very high-grade spodumene, which has to attract someone like Rio. That's a great start. And so let's look for this, look for the scale, look for the large deposits. TG Metals next door has now identified further spodumene veins, which really is testament to the whole Lake Johnson greenstone belt being a host, having the right ingredients and being a host for high-grade spodumene. And now this new trend that we've discovered of high-grade spodumene outcrops. I think, the more exploration that happens in that belt, the more spodumene deposits it's going to find. And I think that's a major attraction for Rio to be part of that first movement on this major greenstone belt in the Yilgarn.
Right. Okay. And one last question before you go. What can investors and shareholders or what should they be expecting in terms of news flow over, say, the next 6 months? What should they be looking out for?
Well, I think certainly straight into Lake Johnson. We're busy now at the end of the year getting the heritage surveys and environmental surveys necessary to open up as much of the Lake Johnson tenure that we can. We already do have APOW in place, so we're pretty much ready to start drilling, get past our EGM in January. So I think really the first week of January we've got drilling scheduled, and it'll be all systems go at Lake Johnson. And then as soon as we can, with weather-wise in the territory, we'll be up there exploring as well. So I think, pretty aggressive exploration for the next 12 months.